Welcome to episode 22 of Arbiter of Worlds. If you're a returning subscriber, thanks for supporting the channel. If you're new to the channel, hello. Here at Arbiter of Worlds, we study the art and science of running and creating tabletop role-playing games. Let's get into it. Last week, we discussed the morbid topic of death in tabletop RPGs. In that video, I noted that most players play their characters as if they were atheist materialists for whom death is the end, even though the character in a fantasy game is probably religious and death is not his end. In other words, in a fantasy world where afterlives like the Elysium Fields and Valhalla are real, the typical player might fear his character's death more than the character fears his own death. In the process of developing the Adventure Conquer King System Imperial imprint, which is the upcoming second edition of my RPG ACKS, I've been thinking a lot about how to address this. How do we create a game where death is still a meaningful consequence, where raised dead doesn't trivialize death, but where death is also not necessarily a tragedy for the player? How can we design a game where, under the right circumstances, the incentives are there to encourage heroism, to reward that Viking hero for dying gloriously? How can we create a game where a player might rationally choose, as a matter of gameplay, to have his character make a decision that's likely to lead to death? How do we balance the mechanics of death with the mechanics of returning from death and the mechanics of not returning from death? My approach to these problems has 5 key principles. 1. Player success is measured by the accumulation of objectively awarded experience points. 2. Dying heroically is better than dying cowardly. 3. Living profligately is better than dying rich. 4. Death does not necessarily come at 0 hit points. And 5, sometimes being raised from the dead is worse than being dead. Let's go over each one. Principle number 1, player success is measured by the accumulation of objectively awarded experience points. In my earlier video, Law, Economics, and Game Design, I discussed at length the merits of an objective XP system in affirming players the agency to act in response to clear incentives. In ACKS II, as in the original ACKS, the entire game system has been structured around the incentive structure of experience points. At each stage of play, Adventurer, Conqueror, and King, there are mechanics that incentivize you to undertake dungeon delves, wilderness expeditions, mercantile commerce, domain rulership, magic research, and more. If you, as a player, are accumulating experience points with the character or characters under your control, doing whatever it is you're doing, then you're succeeding. If you're not, then you're failing and you need to change what you're doing. Now, this is a subtle point. I'm not saying that the character success is measured by the accumulation of XP. XP is an award for character success, but a measure of player success. The implications of this will become clear in just a minute. Principle 2, dying heroically is better than dying cowardly. Now, this principle is intended to reflect the benefits of the ancient and medieval warriors who fought and died believing that glorious death on the battlefield was preferable to dishonor. As the Spartans said, return with your shield or on it. The game mechanic I've created is also based on the beliefs of the ancients who gave their fallen heroes great memorials and in turn valuable grave goods with them to ensure they had a better afterlife. So in ACKS II, if a player's character dies in a heroic manner, and that character is then given a heroic funeral by his former party, the player's next character begins with experience points equal to 90% of the GP value interred in his funeral mound, or otherwise spent on his funeral, up to a maximum of the dead character's XP. However, if a player character dies in a cowardly manner, the character is not eligible for a heroic funeral. No XP for the new PC. And remember, player success is measured by the accumulation of XP. So how does this work in play? Let's assume that a party is losing an encounter with beastmen. They're heavily outnumbered, they're low on resources, they're short on options. If the PCs stay to fight, they will almost certainly be party wiped. If they all flee, they'll almost certainly lose many valuable PCs and henchmen. However, if a well-armored warrior blocks the corridor to prevent pursuit for a few rounds, then it's likely the rest of the party can escape. That's the situation. Now imagine you're the player of a 4th level fighter with 8,500 XP. If your fighter flees, he might be killed, and he's died a coward's death and is ineligible for a heroic funeral. If you stay and fight, your fighter will certainly be killed, but your allies can give him a heroic funeral, and if they invest enough into your next character, You can enter play with up to 8,500 XP. So you, the player, say to your friends at the tabletop, dudes, I'm going to stay and block the corridor while you guys bail. Here's my +1 sword. Use it to fund a memorial for me so I can come back as a badass. And they're like, you sure, bro? Okay, heroic funeral, we got you. Now, this rule creates an incentive for group solidarity. If the party shows that it's willing to fund heroic funerals for fallen player characters, then players will be more likely to sacrifice their characters' lives for the party's greater good. If it refuses, then it becomes every man for himself, which leads to cowardice and loss of XP. So this is a social technology not dissimilar from that of actual afterlife beliefs. Now, to be clear, we're talking about the player's incentives. The character's incentives for heroic death is glory, honor, and reward in the afterlife. In the game world, the fighter is saying something like, we will see each other again on the Elysian fields, brother. Sacrifice to my shade on the anniversary of my death and remember me as your fallen friend, or whatever. So the incentive of ACKS II makes the occasional heroic death and funeral a rational decision for both the individual player and the party as a whole. And they also map diegetically to the motivations of heroes in the game world who want to go to paradise after death. Okay, principle number 3, living profligately is better than dying rich. In most RPGs, player characters accumulate wealth from their adventures. This has been true in all editions of Dungeons & Dragons. It's true in games like Cyberpunk 2020, Shadowrun, Traveler. The accumulation of wealth was, at the inception of the hobby, considered to be an important goal for players to pursue. Nowadays, in many RPGs, character wealth has become meaningless because there's nothing to spend money on and no advantage to having any money. It becomes a measure of vanity, like when billionaires compete to see who has the biggest yacht or the largest net worth. On the other hand, ACKS affords the player countless ways to invest his character's wealth. Masterwork items, henchmen, automatons, crossbred or tamed monsters, magic research, proselytizing for your god, stronghold construction, festivals, armies, supplies. The one thing no ACKS player ever says is, gee, I just can't think of anything to do with all this gold. One of the options that ACKS affords to players is to spend their character's wealth profligately to no tangible in-world benefit. Now, the manner of that wasteful spending is left to the player. For instance, if you're playing a barbarian, you might spend his wealth on wine, women, and song. If you're playing a thief, you might squander his wealth on ill-advised gambling. If you're playing a priestess, you might spend her wealth on anonymous alms for the poor and needy. If you're playing a mage, maybe you spend his wealth on a chryselephantine statue dedicated to the honor of some NPC mentor, or any combination thereof. Whenever the character does this sort of profligate, wasteful spending, the player accumulates a reserve XP fund equal to 90% of the GP his character wasted. The fund belongs to the player and transfers from character to character that he plays. So anytime a player's character dies, his new character can begin play with whatever XP is in the reserve XP fund. And if he gets a heroic funeral, that's added on top up to the maximum of what his prior character had. Reserve XP is thus a type of insurance against the loss of XP that the player can purchase by his character's in-world spending. So this is, again, a subtle point. There's no real in-world benefit to the character for the profligate spending, but there is a real in-game benefit to the player from doing so. And the exact trade-off between profligate spending and prudent investment in equipment, strongholds, retainers, so on, is left to each player. Some players might prefer to invest in-world in tangible assets that improve their character's chances. Other players might prefer a Conan-esque nonchalance about such matters. We let the player choose whether to spend wealth to increase his character's chance of success or to reduce the cost of failure. You could liken the choice to that of spending money on a security system for your home versus purchasing personal property insurance for your home. Both are rational choices to deal with the risk of home burglary. All right, principle number 4. Death does not necessarily come at 0 hit points. In original D&D and in BX and BECMI D&D, death came instantly at 0 hit points. Everyone was either alive or dead. No one was ever dying. In AD&D, Gary Gygax simulated the possibility of being incapacitated and dying, but not yet dead, by allowing characters to descend to -10 hit points before death. Later editions have taken the approach of using death saves of various sorts. What's been largely absent from the D20 tradition is the possibility for the dying to have a fate other than full recovery or death. Similar systems have been used in Warhammer Fantasy and Rolemaster, but not really in D20 Fantasy. ACKS back in 2011 was among the very first games in the D20 tradition to formalize a system where being reduced below 0 hit points might lead to death, dismemberment, disfigurement, disability, or full recovery. And a few years later, when D&D 5th edition came out, it included an optional permanent wounds table, and I have on insider authority that the 5e permanent wounds table was inspired by the ACKS system. So let's talk about that ACKS system, which has actually been expanded on and improved in ACKS II. In ACKS, when a character is reduced to 0 hit points or less, he immediately is knocked prone and becomes incapacitated. He can't speak, he can't move, he can't take any actions. But incapacitation is a temporary condition. It's a quantum state of uncertainty between life and death. When an ally provides some sort of healing to an incapacitated character, then the character's actual fate is determined. The incapacitated player rolls 1d20, and he adds on various modifiers based on the type of healing he's just received, the amount of time he's been incapacitated, his hit dice, his class, his current tally of hit points, and his constitution. For instance, a fighter with 20 hit points, 16 constitution, who's reduced to -2 hit points and then treated with a Cure Serious Injury spell 1 round after he's incapacitated, he rolls 1d20 plus 12. A mage with only 8 hit points, 8 constitution, who gets reduced to -5 hit points and is treated an hour later by an untrained friend who doesn't know what he's doing, he rolls 1d20 minus 11. So it's a big difference. Depending on the die roll total, the character might end up being revealed to be already dead, mortally wounded, grievously wounded, critically wounded, seriously wounded, shocked, temporarily knocked out, or just dazed. And that result tells you how long your friends have to heal the character back to 1 hit point before he expires, and also how much bed rest will be required after he recovers. So let's imagine our fighter rolls a 4, but he's plus 12, so it's a 16. He'd be shocked. He would recover to 1 hit point, but he'd need 1 week of bed rest or some magic healing to be able to return to the fight. Now let's imagine our mage rolls an 18, but he's at minus 11, so he only gets a 7. So he's grievously wounded. He needs to be healed from -5 hit points to 1 hit point within 1 turn, or he dies. And if he is healed, he'll need 2 weeks of bed rest before he adventures again. All right, now in addition to rolling a d20, you also roll a d6. And the result of the d6, in conjunction with the damage type dealt that incapacitated you and the severity of your injury, reveals the nature of the injury that the character suffered. So let's imagine that our fighter was incapacitated by a fireball. He rolls 1d6 on the fire damage table using the shocked row, and let's say he rolls a 2. That means his ear is burned off, and now he has a -1 penalty on surprise and listening rolls in the future. Let's say the mage was incapacitated by a sword slash. He rolls 1d6 on the slashing damage table using the grievously injured row. Let's say he rolls a 6. That means a narrowly avoided decapitation that leaves several vocal cords cut, imposing a -2 penalty on all rolls relating to speech. So he'll be like the Kurgan in Highlander and probably has to start saying, "There can be only one," a lot. So the game system has a lot of amazing implications for gameplay. First, since the character gets a bonus on the die roll the sooner he gets treated, it means that adventurers are motivated to try and rescue and treat fallen comrades as quickly as possible. Second, since the skill and the nature of the healing applied matters, it encourages the party to have some combat medics who can put themselves in danger to help right away. So in other words, it turns healing from a passive activity into an active and heroic activity. Third, since the class, the constitution, and the hit dice of the character matter, it means that certain characters can afford to take much bigger risks in battle, knowing that they're likely to only suffer some minor injury like loss of an ear or a finger, rather than be instantly slain or horribly crippled. And these 3 factors combine to create a tactical value in triage. If multiple party members go down, who gets healed first by who? All right, let's turn to principle number 5. Sometimes being raised from the dead is worse than being dead. Your party's efforts at rescuing and treating your character failed. He's died. You haven't invested in reserve XP, and your character died a coward's death, so he isn't eligible for heroic burial. But the party, in its generosity, however, decides that you're valuable enough to raise from the dead, so they trek to a major temple with your body where a powerful priestess can restore life and limb. Now what happens? In basic D&D and D&D 5th edition, you basically return to life with a short period of downtime. In AD&D, you have to make a resurrection roll to see if you even survive the process, and then you lose a point of constitution. In D&D 3.5, you lose a level of experience. In ACKS, you have to roll on the tampering with mortality tables. There's one of these tables for each alignment in the game, and they work similar to the permanent wounds tables I described earlier, with a D20 and a D6 roll cross-indexed to reveal the result. The longer you've been dead, the worse the state of your corpse, the more your penalty. The more powerful the caster who raises you, the better your bonus. Now, some of the results of tampering with mortality are harmless or even amusing. For instance, one result for lawful characters is that your body reveals its inner light through bronze skin, golden eyes, or a slight halo. Suffer a -2 penalty to reaction rolls with chaotic creatures. All right, so a -2 penalty to reaction rolls with chaotic creatures isn't great. But on the other hand, now you look like Doc Savage. That's kind of cool. All right, but other results are genuinely fates worse than death. Here's one of the results for chaotic characters when they roll badly. Your body is afflicted with a wasting disease. Your charisma and con are permanently reduced by 1d3 points immediately. You lose an additional point each month unless you sacrifice a sapient lawful creature and consume its flesh and blood. A cure disease prevents the wasting for 1 day, but does not dispel the effect. So now, to stay alive, your character has been condemned to a cannibalistic existence. Awful. Here's one for the lawfuls. Your soul is marked, and all extraplanar beings wish you dead, targeting you over allies. Every week, there is a 1 in 6 chance an 8-hit die Keiko demon will be sent to destroy you. So you're alive and well, but you're being hunted all the time, which can be disastrous for not just you, but for your party. So with the ACKS II tampering with mortality tables, getting your character raised from the dead becomes a risky proposition. It might result in a benefit or a relatively innocuous side effect, but it will more likely yield a fate worse than death or a problem that endangers everyone. And the implication of this is that both in-world and in-game, there is a very good reason not to raise the dead. In world, the dead's character's soul is going to an afterlife, and that afterlife is presumably better than a mortal life ridden with a wasting disease or being hunted by demons. In game, the player knows he can rely on reserve XP and heroic funerals to bring a new character into the game without risking tampering with mortality. But it is an option for those who want to pursue it to preserve an important or a favorite character or a necessary party member. So those are the 5 principles I've developed to address the problem of death in tabletop RPGs. I think the result is that ACKS creates a range of risk-reward options for players to improve or ensure. It incentivizes heroic deaths over cowardly behavior. It encourages party solidarity in rewarding heroic death, and it permits resurrection of fallen characters, but at high cost and risk. The mechanics are built to encourage the player to measure his success in the accumulation of XP in the characters under his control, and to simulate the character's belief in an afterlife that rewards valor and heroism and punishes those who attempt to disrupt the cycle of life and afterlife or who behave cowardly. Let me know in the comments what you think of the systems I've described. For those of you who would like to learn more, you can get a copy of the ACKS rules for permanent wounds and tampering with mortality by purchasing Axiom's issue 16, Wounds and Woe, which I've linked in the description below with a coupon code for 50% off. If you've enjoyed today's video, be sure to heroically click the like and subscribe buttons so that my video can ascend to Valhalla on the wings of algorithmic Valkyries.